Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
It was a sunny, clear, and warm summer day. Lucía was walking home after her night shift and decided to stop by the mall on the way. Today, they promised decent discounts for discount card holders, so her mother asked Lucía to buy some things according to the list. They were not wealthy, and Lucía's salary and her mother's pension were barely enough. So they had to be thrifty. There it was, a huge building shining with colorful lights. Crowds of people, children, and the heady aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Lucía loved strolling through the shopping center like this, unhurriedly, enjoying shopping. She could try on a dress or a pair of shoes that caught her eye. Even if she didn't buy them, admiring herself dressed up elegantly in front of the mirror in the fitting room was a great pleasure for her. It felt like stepping into high society for Lucía, especially since her hectic schedule as an ambulance paramedic rarely allowed her to go out anywhere. Lucía picked a smooth, pale pink lipstick in the cosmetics department, bought it, and then enjoyed a cup of coffee, savoring every sip. Well, the day turned out to be excellent. Now, let's go get groceries, she decided and went downstairs to the supermarket. Standing in a queue at the cash register, our heroine witnessed an unpleasant conflict. A small, poorly dressed boy was trying to buy milk, bread, and rice. But he lacked the money. Instead of forgiving the boy's lack of money and ringing up the items, the grumpy overweight cashier started shouting, "Get out of here, you pathetic beggar. If you don't have money, you shouldn't be slumming in a shop. Security, come here." At the same time, people stood completely indifferent, only a few were outraged why the line wasn't moving forward. The poor boy was frightened to death, dropped everything, and was about to run away, but the cashier held him tightly by the sleeve, continuing to humiliate him. Lucía's heart ached at such injustice towards this unfortunate child. She approached him and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll pay for you." She handed the necessary amount to the cashier and said reproachfully, "Aren't you ashamed? He was only short of a tiny amount. And you shouted out for everyone to hear. He's just a child. He got scared to death." Someone in the line objected. "But he's a beggar, it's obvious just by looking at him. Why should we feel sorry for him? He comes here often, looks around, but doesn't buy anything. He doesn't have money. Dysfunctional mothers give birth to beggar children, and they can steal something at any moment." Lucía was struck by such hardness and indifference from people. Can it really be like this? What have we come to? Insulting a poor child who's barely 6 years old. She paid for her items and left the shopping mall in a terrible mood. All the euphoria from shopping had vanished somewhere. Suddenly, the little boy caught up with her. He looked into her eyes and said quietly, "Señorita, thank you. You're kind and good, unlike that rat at the cashier. Don't think I'm some kind of orphan. I have a home. Do you want me to show it to you?" Lucía laughed heartily and thought that she really should take the child home. He looked about 6 years old, no elder, and he was wandering alone in the capital city. He could get hit by a car. She firmly took his hand and said, "You can call me Aunt Lucía. What's your name?" The boy brightened up and replied, "I'm Sandro." "Great. Shall we go to your home then?" "Yes, let's go. I feel so bad and scared when I'm alone. But it's quite far, about an hour away." The boy gave her the exact address, which indeed turned out to be on the outskirts of the city. But how did such a young fellow end up here? Who let him go alone? She decided not to walk and waited for a bus. They traveled together, and along the way, the boy fell asleep while Lucía, looking out the window, started reflecting on her past, recalling her childhood and youth. Lucía's mother, Ana Garcia, was a midwife at the maternity hospital. She dedicated her entire life to this profession, while her father was a simple locksmith at a machine-building plant. Nothing extraordinary, just an average middle-class family. In her childhood, Lucía loved animals very much. Stray cats and puppies were always hanging around their building, and she selflessly fed and cared for them. When her parents noticed her thirst for medicine, they gave her a children's doctor's set as a birthday present. Oh, how happy she was! The girl would measure everyone's temperature 100 times a day and often pretend to give injections. As she grew up, she decided to follow in her mother's footsteps and enrolled in a medical university to become a paramedic. Lucía was so passionate about medicine that she easily passed all her exams. However, secretly, she dreamed of further education, obtaining a master's degree, and becoming a professional doctor. When her parents found out about her aspirations, they were horrified and tried to dissuade her. "Darling, where would we get that kind of money from? Once you finish university and get a job as a nurse, that's good enough. You know how expensive it is to study for a master's degree. It's only for the rich," her parents exclaimed. But Lucía was a stubborn and determined girl, just like her mother, so she didn't give up on her dream. She found a job at a private clinic, saved money, took extra shifts, and although she was exhausted, she managed to save enough in a year to afford her master's degree. She applied on her own and, to her surprise, got admitted on the first attempt. That's when her father started kissing and hugging her. "Oh, my daughter. You've done it. I'm so proud of you. Honestly, I didn't believe you could do it. You're amazing. You'll go far with such determination. Now I'll tell everyone at work that my daughter is a future doctor. You'll be the one treating your mother and me." Time flew by, another 7 years of education passed, and there she was, Lucía Garcia, a therapist. She found a job at a local hospital department and carried out her duties with enthusiasm and zeal. She didn't brush aside from elderly patients, whom many of her colleagues disliked and considered troublesome. She patiently listened to all their complaints, explained the proper treatment, and encouraged them for the upcoming healing process. Sometimes, she had to take care of them like young children, persuading them to undergo necessary procedures or take their medications. She often stayed late in her office, meticulously reviewing each case. When necessary, she studied medical literature or consulted with her professors. That's why patients adored Lucía Garcia and almost worshipped her. Some would say, she's a God-sent doctor. But one thing saddened the woman. From the very beginning of her career, the hospital director, an unpleasant and rude man named Federico Solar, started harassing her. As soon as he saw her, he grinned in a carnivorous manner, well-groomed, young, attractive, just in her prime. At first, he would give compliments and hints, but when he realized that Lucía was not responding to them, he escalated to more aggressive actions. One day, he called her to his office, and Lucía came, suspecting nothing. It often happened in work situations, maybe there was some question. However, the old womanizer locked the door, forcefully pressed her against the wall, and attempted to lift her coat. He breathed heavily and grunted, saying, "Come on, my little chica, don't resist. Don't ruin your career. If we get along, I'll support you always and everywhere. What harm could it do to you? I'll retire soon, and you'll become the senior doctor, I promise." It was outrageous. Lucía broke free from his grasp and slapped him with all her might. "If you ever dare to do something like this again, I will report you to the Department of Medicine. You have a wife, children, and grandchildren already. And look at what you're doing. Disgusting. Senior Solar, I had a better opinion of you." And she ran out of the office in tears, adjusting her medical cap that had fallen askew. She barely calmed herself in the restroom, splashing cold water on her face. Since then, the vindictive hospital director had been systematically ruining her life. He would smile sweetly to her face and act extremely polite, as if nothing had happened. However, he would always deprive Lucía of monetary bonuses, finding one fabricated excuse after another. He frequently made her work night shifts, as well as during holidays and weekends. Her colleagues sympathized with the doctor and often lamented, "What a scoundrel! He's making Lucía's life unbearable. When will they finally retire him?" In the end, after a year of such exhausting work and moral pressure, Lucía couldn't take it anymore and transferred to work as a regular paramedic in the emergency department. They welcomed her with open arms, as the work was challenging and there was a shortage of competent professionals. Also, the salary was much lower. But the team was amazing. Now, she could find solace in her work. Everyone was a united and supportive team, always helping and kept one another. And that was much more valuable than a high salary but constant stress. Unexpectedly, a week later, Lucía's father passed away. It was a profound shock and sorrow for her and her mother. He had always been the true head of the family, solving any problem. He would listen, give a hug, and find a solution to everything. And now, she and her mother were left completely alone. Her mother had often told Lucía, "My dear, it's time for you to get married. Your father was waiting and waiting, but he never saw you getting married. Time is passing, and all you think about is work. Take a good look around, maybe there's a handsome doctor at work. Or go to a cafe, have some fun. You're like a robot, always going the route homework, work home. All you talk about is patients and difficult cases." Lucía would just brush it off and say, "Oh, Mom, don't start. I'll have time to get married. I need to understand what real happiness is. I want love to be genuine, like yours with Dad." Her mother laughed and said, "Well said. Your father and I met at a disco and almost immediately got married. Back then, it wasn't common to delay weddings for too long. We got married and only then got to know each other. But I was lucky. Your father turned out to be a decent person. He never hurt me, and he loved you so much. So I don't know if it's love or fate, perhaps." In reality, Lucía, deep down, agreed with her mother, and she also wanted to have a child, considering she was almost 30. She often had the same dream where she walked hand in hand with a tall man with a strong chin, and they were holding a little boy's hand. They would all laugh and discuss something. It felt so good and light in her soul. But for some reason, she had no luck in that aspect. There was one guy in her life, back in her college years, named Armando. He was the son of wealthy parents, confident and carefree as a student. Lucía found him very attractive, with a good figure and intelligence. They dated for 4 months. The guy courted her, inviting her to movies and concerts on weekends, and then he suddenly invited her to his house. Lucía was overjoyed, thinking that Armando wanted to introduce her to his parents, which would mean their relationship was serious. However, as it turned out, the guy had a completely different intention. Upon entering the house, he pounced on her and tried to force her into intimacy. He pushed her onto the bed, and Lucía was completely caught off guard by this turn of events. She vigorously resisted and screamed, pleading, "Stop! No! I don't want this. You are hurting me. I don't want it." But he shouted back in her face, "Have you gone mad? You came willingly, you agreed, and now you don't want it? What did I agree to? I thought you were taking me to meet your parents. Stop it, Armando." But the guy seemed to have gone mad. "Why are you being stubborn? That's enough. We've been dating for 4 months, and you keep pushing me away. Look at your classmate, Sagra. She jumped on me the first night. Or did you think I would keep taking you to cafes and giving you gifts for nothing? Everything comes with a price." Lucía managed to break free from his grip. She forcefully pushed him away. With trembling hands, she took off the ring he had given her and threw it at him. She took out all the money from her wallet and threw it in his face, saying, "That's it. I don't owe you anything anymore. I hate you, you scumbag." She barely opened the door with trembling hands and ran home in tears. She cried for a long time, locking herself in the bathroom, not telling anyone anything. Since then, Lucía was afraid of men and avoided them, believing that they only wanted one thing from women. And the incident with the hospital director at work only reinforced her opinion. So whenever a male colleague tried to court her or show signs of attention, she instinctively closed herself off immediately. The experience of her first unsuccessful romantic relationships had a lasting impact. Lucía didn't know how to overcome this complex. The voice of a boy pulled her out of her memories. "Lucía, we've arrived. We need to get off now. Look, you can see my house from here." She snapped out of her thoughts and nodded her head. The boy led her to the third floor of an old panel building, efficiently opened the front door with a key, and commanded, "Come in. This is where I live." Lucía looked around. The surroundings were very modest: old, faded and worn-out wallpaper, minimal furniture. The strong smell of sweat and medicine hit her nose. She wondered where the boy's parents were. It seemed unlikely for him to live alone. On tiptoes, she entered the bedroom and saw a man tossing and turning in delirium on the bed, covered with a pile of blankets despite the summer heat. He looked exhausted, unshaven, drenched, and unconscious. Lucía exclaimed, "Oh my God! Sandro, is this your father?" The little boy nodded. "Yes, his name is Maximino. He got very sick, and I'm taking care of him. 2 days ago, he told me which medicines to buy and made tea, but now he's sleeping all the time for some reason. He won't wake up at all. I talked to him, but he doesn't respond. So I thought maybe he's hungry. I went to buy food for him and me. I'm very hungry too. And I'm so scared. He won't die, right, Auntie?" Lucía quickly checked the man's temperature, and it was very high. From his distinctive cough, she immediately realized that he had pneumonia, and it was in a neglected form. Her first thought was, of course, to call an ambulance. But then she looked at Sandro and thought, what will I tell them? I'm a stranger for them, and I also don't even know their names. They will surely send the boy to an orphanage. Am I not a doctor? I have treated so many patients. I'll treat him by myself and then we'll see what happens. I won't leave the child in danger. She brought a bowl of cool water, wiped the man's forehead, and placed a wet towel on it. Then she sternly told the boy, Sandro, I'll quickly run to the pharmacy. You stay with your father, don't cover him with blankets, he's already feeling hot. Just change the towel more frequently. Can you handle it? He nodded his head, saying, Yes, I can handle it. Aunt Lucía, are you sure you won't leave us? You won't be gone forever, right? I'm scared to be alone with him. She gently pats the boy's head, saying, I promise I'll be back soon. Wait for me. Lucía spent half of her salary buying medicine and syringes before rushing back to Sandro. On the way, she called her mother. Mom, I won't come home today. And probably not tomorrow either. I need to help a patient get better. It's a long story. Someone's life is at stake. Moreover, there's a little boy there all alone. I'm sorry, but I have to help. Her mother let out a sigh and replied, Well, if that's what you need to do. You can't be changed. Go ahead, doctor, treat your patients. I'll be waiting for you. Just call me more often so I don't worry. Arriving at Sandro's apartment, Lucía expertly began the treatment. She was giving injections at specific intervals, gave him fever-reducing medications, and set up an 4-drip. She forcefully fed the patient small amounts of warm lemon tea. In the meantime, she cooked lunch for Sandro, a chicken soup and potatoes with meat. The boy was happy and ate with a hearty appetite. He actively helped, attempting to peel the potatoes and wash the dishes. In the evening, Lucía prepared the child's bed in his room and said, All right, Sandro, it's time to go to bed. It's late, and children need to sleep. He asked nervously, grabbing onto her dress. Aunt Lucía, and you? Will you leave? What if Dad gets worse at night? She gently petted his unruly red curls and booped his nose, saying, Sandro, I am a real doctor. And doctors don't leave their patients. So sleep and don't worry, I'll stay with you until your dad gets better. Can I ask you something, though? Where's your mom? Why doesn't she live with you? Maybe I should call her and let her know that your dad is sick and you're here alone. The boy just shrugged and said, "I don't know. I've never seen her. I asked Dad 100 times. He just stays silent or says she's somewhere up there, pointing upwards. But I still don't understand where that is. And I don't know how to call there." Lucía felt so sorry for the little boy, to the point of tears. She understood that his mother had passed away, but she didn't want to show it and quietly said, "All right, Sandro, good night." Throughout the night, Lucía sat by Maximino's bedside, bringing down his fever and changing the compresses and damp sheets under him. Only in the early morning, when the temperature finally dropped, did she fall asleep sitting in a chair. She was awakened by the hoarse voice of the man. He was whispering something quietly, his lips cracked from illness. Lucía approached him, leaned closer, gently touched his head, and asked, "How do you feel? Thank God, you woke up. I'll heat up some soup for you, and you'll have a little to eat. You need to regain your strength." But he suddenly grabbed her hand and started crying, saying, "Olea, my love. Oh, my God. I can't believe my eyes. It's you. So, I must be dead and in heaven? Poor Sandro, he's there on earth, all alone. Who will take care of him?" Lucía was surprised and shook her head. "He's still delirious. I'm not Olea, I'm Lucía, and you don't know me at all. You're not dead. Sandro is sleeping in his own room. We need to give you another sedative. This strange reaction is probably due to the high fever." The man shook his head, tears rolling down his unshaven cheeks. "I don't believe it. It can't be. You are Olea, my wife. But she died 6 years ago. And if I'm looking at you, then I must be dead too. How else could it be? Darling, let me hug you. I felt so miserable without you there. Why are you so cold to me? Please, just let me hold you." Lucía was even more surprised and patiently explained again. "No, I am Lucía. I'm a doctor. Your son, Sandro, accidentally met me yesterday and brought me here. He wanted to help but didn't know how. So, I agreed to help you. I'll stay with him and treat you at the same time." Lucía called out, "Sandro, I hear you, you're not asleep, come here. Your dad has come to his senses." The little boy quickly jumped off the bed and rushed barefoot to his father. He threw himself into his father's arms and cried tears of joy, saying, "Dad, I'm so glad you're alive. I was so scared. I thought you would never wake up again. Do you want some tea? I'll heat it up right away." The man looked at his son with a bewildered expression. "Well, for real, it's you, Sandro. What happened? Did I go crazy? I feel like a complete idiot." He tried to sit up abruptly but immediately fell back onto the bed, wincing in chest pain. Lucía sternly said, "All right, Maximino, no heroics here. You have pneumonia, and you need at least 3 more weeks of treatment. Getting up is definitely out of the question for now. So listen to the doctor. Otherwise, I'll call an ambulance, and they'll take you to the hospital." Maximino quietly replied, "No need for an ambulance. I don't want to go to the hospital. Besides, I have no one to leave Sandro with. Thank you for taking care of me. But my goodness, you look so much like my late wife, like a twin sister. Her portrait is up there on the shelf. I wanted to show it to you. Take a look at it yourself. Otherwise, you might think I've gone crazy. I agree to the treatment and eating the soup. Don't worry, as soon as I recover, I'll earn money and repay you. I understand how much you've spent." As the man's fever started to rise again and he struggled to breathe, coughing heavily, Lucía forbade him from talking too much, made him eat a little, gave injections, set up the 4-drip, and told him to rest. He fell asleep instantly, as he was still quite weak. Meanwhile, Lucía finally took that portrait and gasped. It really depicted her, only with a different hairstyle and different clothing. but everything else was an exact replica. She wondered, how is this even possible? She stared at the portrait and then at her own reflection in the mirror, seeing the same face. Sandro approached quietly, also looking at the portrait, then at Lucía, and matter-of-factly said, "It's you, Aunt Lucía." Although Dad always said it was my mom, who is somewhere up there. "So, does it mean you are my mom? Did you come down from there like a fairy? Wow. I thought that only happened in movies." Lucía hugged the little boy and replied, "Oh, Sandro, I don't understand it myself, honestly, but your mom really does resemble me a lot. Well, let's go. I'll give you a bath instead. Look at how dirty you are. And we'll also tidy up the apartment since I'm temporarily your mom. And once your dad recovers, we'll figure out who's whose mom and who isn't." Together, they worked diligently, tidying up the place. Lucía took care of the boy by giving him a bath, cutting his hair, and finding clean clothes for him. They joyfully cooked meals together while also taking care of Maximino. Lucía took a week off from work and dedicated all her time to Maximino and Sandro. Surprisingly, in their humble apartment, she felt light and comfortable, just like at home. The little boy was well-mannered and surprisingly adult. In the evenings, they would paint and draw together, and then she would tell him imaginative stories on the spot. With each passing day, Maximino's condition improved. He was starting to get up slowly, although still breathing heavily and wheezing. The man watched Lucía and Sandro, tears welling up in his eyes. It felt like Olea was with them, and they were a full and close-knit family again. It was so strange and unbelievable. He felt like he was dreaming, that all of this couldn't possibly be reality. And how Sandro had changed in just 1 week. From a quiet and reserved boy, he turned into a lively and cheerful child. Happiness sparkled in his innocent eyes. He never left Lucía's side and followed her everywhere. It was evident that he was finally receiving the attention and maternal warmth and care that he had been missing all those years. The week flew by like a single day, and it was time for Lucía to return to work. Maximino was still weak, but he could manage with Sandro even without her. She sat by his bed and began the conversation. "Maximino, I have to go to work tomorrow. And I also need to go home, my mother is there alone. So, I'll be leaving soon. But I'll come straight to you after my shift. If I'm working nearby, I'll drop by to give you injections. Tell me about yourself and your late wife. How did it happen that she passed away?" The man sighed and began his story. "I grew up in a troubled family. My parents, if they can even be called that, were alcoholics. I often went hungry and wandered the streets. To this day, I see my mother's swollen, distorted face from drinking and hear her screams, as well as the face of my drunken stepfather who frequently abused me. I walked around with bruises for weeks. I was lucky that Zenobia, our neighbor, took pity on me and fed me. She also pushed me to study, not to skip school, and scolded me when I started smoking and got drunk for the first time. She got me in a construction college after high school. Otherwise, I would have ended up in prison or even something worse. I met Olea in college. I was immediately attracted to her. I noticed that she always sat on a bench, looking somewhat sad, reading a book, not in a hurry to go home, just like me. I tried my best to buy her chocolates, ice cream, or pies with my last bit of money. That's how we became friends. Her situation wasn't any better. Her mother died when she was 10 years old. Her mother was a heavy drinker, and her elderly grandmother raised her. But her grandmother passed away after we got married. I fell in love with Olea the moment I saw her. My heart started beating faster, and my breath was taken away. Her hair was so beautiful, golden and thick, just like yours, and her eyes were kind and slightly melancholic. But she observed me for a long time, not believing that I had serious intentions. After all, I was a poor guy without a home or money. After college, I got a job at a factory, and they gave me this apartment. I worked like a beast, taking extra shifts, just to provide for my family. Olea trained as a house painter and earned a good income too. She did get tired, though. The work was hard. Can you believe it? We never had a serious quarrel. She would get angry if I had a couple of beers with my friends after work, but by the next morning, she would be making breakfast and worrying if I had a headache. We really wanted a baby, of course. How could it be otherwise? But luck wasn't on our side. One miscarriage after another, and the doctors advised against getting pregnant. They said we needed a break, but it turned out that she was pregnant again almost immediately. Olea suffered a lot. Her belly hurt all the time, and her job wasn't easy either, harmlessness and hazard the whole day. And then, in the 7th month of her pregnancy, she suddenly started bleeding heavily in the middle of the night. I was terrified, so I took her to the hospital in a taxi. All night long, I prayed, cried, and begged for her to survive. But in the morning, I received the dreadful news. She had premature birth, and my wife died from the bleeding, which doctors couldn't stop. The baby was also very weak, and nobody gave him a chance of survival. He was too small and premature, unable to breathe on his own. I thought I would go crazy with grief. I couldn't believe what was happening. Then came the funeral, and the unbearable loneliness and sorrow. I lost my mind with grief in this apartment, pounding my fists against the walls. Sandro spent 2 months in the department for preterm. I visited him, holding that tiny bundle of red, which didn't resemble a normal baby at all. At times, I even guiltily wondered if he was worth Olea's life. But I couldn't find an answer. Thank God, my son survived and grew stronger, despite the doctor's predictions, and he was finally discharged from the hospital. That's when the survival test began. None of my acquaintances believed that I could raise my son alone. Some even advised me to give him up to an orphanage. But I was strongly against it. I barely had a childhood myself, so I swore to myself that I would raise my son properly. At first, it was unbearably difficult, but I learned how to swaddle, bathe, and feed him. I took parental leave, and then I started working 3 days in a row, relying on neighbors or friends to look after him. Gradually, everything has worked out. However, about 3 months ago, things went wrong. I was laid off and lost my job. But we needed to survive, and I couldn't leave Sandro for long. So I got a job as a janitor in our neighborhood. I finish work before noon and have free time. The pay is very low, but at least I can take Sandro to daycare and pick him up afterward. A couple of weeks ago, I got caught in heavy rain and got completely soaked. That's when I fell ill. I thought it was just a cold and tried to treat myself, but it only got worse and worse. I was afraid to call an ambulance because I had no one to leave Sandro with. I don't remember anything after that. I must have lost consciousness. Thank you, Lucía, for responding to someone else's misfortune and saving me. And for taking care of my son. There aren't many caring people like you in our times, Lucía. Honestly, I don't want you to leave. It literally makes me want to cry. And Sandro has become a completely different child in just 1 week. He's radiating with happiness. So our home is always open for you. We're always glad to have you. You're like our guardian angel now. Lucía said quietly. You know, Maximino, I don't understand what's happening to me either. We hardly know each other. But it feels like I've always lived here, you know? Everything feels so familiar, so easy and cozy. And it's like I've known you for 100 years, and Sandro feels like my own, from the very first moment. Can it really be possible? And the most puzzling thing is, I can't understand how I can resemble your wife so much. We're like twins. But I definitely don't have any siblings. I'm an only child. I need to have a serious talk with my mom. Can I take a picture of this portrait of Olea? I want to show it to her. Maximino replied. There's an album in the closet. Choose any photograph of Olea. We used to take pictures often. It was my hobby once. Lucía opened the album and was astonished. Incredibly, in every photograph, she saw herself. The same smile, the same eyes, and even the mole under the right eye. She chose one close-up photo and put it in her bag. Then she went to say goodbye to Sandro. "Well, Sandro, I have to go to work tomorrow. Take care of your father, don't let him walk too much. Do you understand? There's food in the refrigerator, warm it up in the morning." The boy suddenly became serious and sad, and he asked softly, looking into her eyes, "You're leaving forever, right? Tell me honestly. What about us? How will we live?" A wave of tenderness and compassion swept through Lucia's body. She hugged the boy and promised quietly, "As soon as I finish work, I'll come right back to you. I promise. Deal?" Sandro beamed and replied, "Deal. I'll miss you, Aunt Lucia." He hugged her with his warm, children's hands. Lucia was on her way home, preparing for a serious conversation with her mother. She was amazed at herself. Just a week ago, she didn't know Sandro or Maximino, and she was living an ordinary and dull life. But now, they were the most important and significant people in her life. She couldn't imagine how she would live without them. Whenever she thought of Maximino, a wave of love and tenderness, mixed with pity and compassion for this man whom fate had treated so cruelly, overwhelmed her. Her mother was really glad to see her daughter and immediately began to grumble like an old woman. "Finally, you've come home. Where have you been? This has never happened before. I was so worried. Who is this important patient you've been treating for a week?" Lucia hugged her mother and kissed her cheek. "Don't scold me. I have something serious to talk to you about. I found this portrait in the patient's house where I was treating him. Look, she looks so much like me. It's the same face. Mother, tell me the truth. This woman in the photograph seems to have some connection to me." Her mother immediately clutched her chest, took her medication, remained silent for a moment, and then began to tell the complicated and long story. "You see, my darling, your father and I couldn't conceive a child for a long time. I've never told anyone about this, but I had committed a terrible sin in my youth. I thought that Demetrio was truly in love with me. I imagined a love story that wasn't real. Anyway, I got pregnant, as luck would have it, on the first try. When he found out, he flew into a rage and forced me to have an abortion, saying that he didn't need children at that moment. During the abortion procedure, they injured me. I suffered for a long time afterward. I wanted to die. My health deteriorated dramatically. I never told anyone about it. And then I met your father at a dance. He fell in love with me immediately and proposed. We got married shortly after. We started a family. But no matter how hard we tried, I couldn't get pregnant again, and I was afraid to tell the truth to my husband. I thought he would leave me right away. Who would need me then? And on that night, I happened to be on shift. They brought in a young girl, not yet 18, from a troubled family with an alcoholic stepfather and mother. She was poorly dressed and not well-groomed. She didn't know who the father of her babies was. And she was carrying twins. Surprisingly, she gave birth quickly and without complications to twin girls. But she refused to hold them, and she wasn't happy about it. She wanted to leave them both at the hospital. She said she couldn't raise 2 children, and she didn't have enough money as it was, and having 2 children would only make it worse. And then a thought occurred to me. I told her, give me one of the babies. It will be easier for you, and it will bring happiness to me. And the children won't be left as orphans. She didn't object at all. She was even relieved to have one less problem. My colleagues at work helped me, and they handled all the paperwork. I adopted you. I was really scared that your father wouldn't accept you because I didn't consult him about it. At first, he scolded me and didn't speak to me for a week. But then he took you in his arms, carried you around, contemplated, and said, let's name her Lucía. She will be mine, you got it? And don't tell anyone a word about it. So, my girl, you now have a father and a mother. Everything will be fine. Daddy won't let anyone harm you. Since then, he cherished you as if you were his own daughter, and I loved you too. Because you are our little girl. You are the closest thing I have. Please forgive me, Lucía, for keeping the truth from you. Don't be angry with us." Lucía was in complete shock. So much had been thrust upon her during this challenging week. She didn't know how to react or what to do with her life now. It turned out that everything had been decided for her. They had taken away her mother and her biological sister, and they never told her anything about it. Lucía whispered, "Mom, how am I supposed to make sense of all this now? I treated a man named Maximino, whose late wife turns out to be my twin sister, whom I never saw in my life. And his son, Sandro, is my nephew. He considers me his mother. Oh, what a mess you've created. How am I supposed to act around him now? And how do I explain to the child that I'm not his mother? Why didn't you tell me all this earlier when Oleo was still alive? We could have been friends, communicated. She's my sister, after all. I don't know how to live with all this, honestly. I need to figure things out within myself. Sorry, I'll go to my room." Ana Garcia cried all night and was deeply worried. That's it. Now Lucía will blame me for everything and never forgive me. How will I live without her? I should have told her everything earlier. But how? After spending a whole day on emergency calls with the ambulance team, Lucía couldn't get it out of her head. She didn't know what to do next. She felt drawn to Maximino, and she missed Sandro like crazy. But everything was so tangled. Raising her nephew and calling him her son? Falling in love with a man for whom she would be a constant reminder of his late wife? Calling someone else's woman mother for a lifetime and forgiving her for everything? Never seeing her own sister but taking her place in someone else's family after her death? Lucia's head was spinning with these thoughts. Their driver, Silvio, was a good friend of Lucia's. They often had heart-to-heart conversations and shared their concerns. The old man immediately noticed that something was wrong with the doctor. When he saw Lucía sitting sadly with her bag on a bench near work after her shift, he timidly approached her. "Lucía, may I sit next to you? Hope I'm not bothering you. Why are you so sad?" The woman sighed and gestured for her old friend to sit down. "Oh, Silvio. You won't believe it. I feel like I'm in one of those fairy tales with 3 roads, and I don't know which one to choose. Something happened, and I can't wrap my head around it. My whole life has turned upside down. It turns out that half of my life wasn't mine, but someone else's life that was forced upon me." The man said quietly, "Tell me what happened. Maybe I can help you figure things out. It'll also make it easier for you. If you don't want to talk about it, I understand. It's a personal matter." Lucía sadly shared with him all her news and adventures. Then she added, "What should I do now? I don't know. How do I continue living? Keep calling someone else's woman mom? Tell my nephew that he's my son? And how do I explain all this to Maximino?" Silvio objected. "Let me tell you, Lucía. Your situation is certainly not easy. It's like a movie plot. If you don't know what to do what your heart tells you right now. It won't deceive you. So where do you want to go now? To Maximino or back home to your mother?" Lucía nodded in agreement. "To Maximino. And Sandro. I'm drawn to them. They occupy all my thoughts." The chauffeur said, "Well, then go. Tell him everything as it is. Lies, even if they're meant to protect, always backfire. Don't be afraid of anything, don't worry about what people will think, just live. Time will show how things unfold. And don't hold grudges against your mother. However you look at it, she raised you well. Look at what a wonderful doctor you've become. Everyone makes mistakes, it's in the past, not for us to judge our parents. Who knows where you would have grown up if it weren't for your adoptive mother? Maybe in an orphanage. Your biological mother, as you yourself say, couldn't raise you and your sister properly. So, everything happens for the best. Lucía smiled and shook her colleague's hand. Thank you, Silvio. You're so wise. I feel lighter now. Well, I'm off. I'm sure Sandro is waiting for me. I promised him I'd be back soon. Lucía took a bus to Maximino's place, buying fruits, sweets, and a big beautiful backpack for Sandro along the way. After she rang the doorbell, Sandro immediately threw himself into her arms with a cry of joy. He hugged her tightly and whispered, "Hooray! You came after all. You didn't lie to me. Let's go, I'll feed you. Dad and I made roasted potato with mushrooms." Lucía was horrified. What potatoes? He's not ready to walk yet, he's still too weak. I didn't allow him to get up, did I? The frightened little boy widened his eyes. I think I slipped up. Just don't tell my dad. Maximino lay in bed like a perfect patient and smiled. I did everything as you instructed. I took my pills, gargled with the solution. And I missed you so much, I swear. So, how are you? Are you very tired? Did you find out from your mother the secret behind your resemblance to Olea? Lucía took a deep breath and replied, I'm about to tell you something that will blow your mind. I don't even know how you and Sandro will react. Personally, I'm still in shock. Maximino sat up. So, it's a serious matter. Son, go throw out the trash, we'll go eat soon. As soon as the front door closed, the woman continued. It turns out that Olea, your late wife, and I are twin sisters. Our mother gave birth to us and wanted to leave us because she came from a troubled family. But my adoptive mother, who worked as a midwife there and couldn't have children, convinced her to give me to her and take the other girl, saying it would be easier with just one child. It's awful. I had a biological sister all my life, and I didn't know it. We could have been friends, communicated, helped each other. So, Sandro is not a stranger to me at all, he's my nephew. You know, maybe that's why I couldn't walk past him at the supermarket that time. And here, in your home, I already felt like I've been before. Maybe that's why I have feelings for you. People say there's a strong karmic bond between twins, even if they're not together. I don't know, Maximino, what should I do next? I'm completely confused, to be honest. The man smiled even wider. What should you do? Marry me. It's obvious. I know I'm still weak as a groom, but once I fully recover and find a proper job, we'll live as a happy family. And Sandro will be happy too, I'm more than sure. He's already crazy about you. So, think about it, I'm not joking. Lucía was taken aback by such a proposal. She certainly didn't expect a marriage proposal. But one question bothered her. Maximino, won't you always compare me to Olea in your mind? I'm just her copy to you. And in reality, you love Olea, not me. I need you to love me, you know? Let's just be friends for now. I can live with you, be with Sandro. I'm really attached to him, especially since he's my nephew. We'll see how things go from there. Is that okay? Maximino looked saddened and appeared deeply disappointed, but he said aloud, So be it. I'll accept whatever decision you make. I'm still happy that you're with us now. So, are you going to take a bite of our potatoes? Don't wait till it cools down. The three of them had dinner together, laughed, and Sandro proudly walked around the apartment with the backpack given to him, placing children's books inside and pretending to be a schoolboy. The next day was a day off, and in the morning, Lucía said to Maximino, I need to visit my mom and apologize to her. I said some unnecessary things in the heat of the moment. I can imagine how worried she must be. Can I take Sandro with me? The little one should meet his grandmother, right? Everyone has a grandmother, but Sandro doesn't. It's not fair. And when you're fully recovered, we'll all go visit her together. Or we can invite my mom here as a guest, okay? Sandro was thrilled. Hooray! Are we going to visit? What's Grandma's name? Is she very old? Can she bake empanadas? Valerio, my friend, his grandma bakes such delicious empanadas. The boy asked 1,000 questions. When Lucia and Sandro entered the house, Sonora Garcia immediately guessed who they were because Sandro resembled Lucia. One could even think he was her son. The woman was overjoyed and bustled about. "Oh, who has come to visit us?" "Hello, little one, what's your name?" The boy replied confidently. "I'm Sandro, your grandson." "That's what Mom Lucia said." "So are you my real grandma? The one and only?" The woman couldn't help herself laughing. "Of course, the real one. My name is Anna." "Well, why are we standing at the doorstep? Let's go to the kitchen, I'll treat you. I have fresh paella and sugar buns straight from the oven." The little one ate heartily and sat down to watch his favorite cartoon. Lucia took her mother's hand and whispered softly, "Please forgive me, Mom, for answering you so harsh back then. I spoke without thinking. Later on, I reconsidered everything. And I want to thank you for raising me with Dad, for loving me. I felt it. It's a pity, of course, that I didn't get to talk to Olea, but well, it seems to be our fate. But now I have a nephew, Sandro. I'm so attached to him, he's wonderful. The only thing is, he thinks I'm his mother, and I don't know how to explain to him that it's not true. And also, Maximino proposed to me. I declined, but I will live with them. I don't know, Mom, I'm completely confused." Ana Garcia asked Lucia again. How is this? I don't understand. How do you plan to live with a man and raise his child, and what role? You need to figure it out for yourself, my dear. Either you're a complete family, or you should refrain from it before it's too late. Don't harm the child's heart. It's not right. Maximino is not made of steel, he won't endure it for long. Don't you love Maximino? If not, then I understand. Love cannot be forced. Lucia nodded her head. Mom, I'm confused. I love Maximino. And I adore Sandro. But I'm worried that Maximino sees me as just a copy of his late wife, Olea, and he loves her, not me, you know? But what about me? I want to be loved for my own soul, not someone else's. The woman sighed heavily and replied, You know, my dear, it's difficult for me to give you advice because I've made many mistakes myself. But I can tell you one thing, when I married your father, maybe I didn't love him at first. But with some kind of my woman's instinct, I understood that he loved me and would never let me down, that I wouldn't be lost with him. And I've never regretted making that choice. Your father did everything he could for the family. He respected, valued, and loved me all his life, no matter what. Some men, you see, leaving their own children. But your father loved you as his own, even more, and he never blamed me for being childless. And I learned to love him later, when I felt that kind of devotion. Do you understand? It's the same with Maximino. He loved his wife deeply and raised his own son. So, I believe he will love you too. At first, he may mentally compare you to Olea, but then you will see who you truly are, and everything will fall into place. And it's up to you to decide from there. I'll support you no matter what. They sat together a little longer, and Lucia started packing her things. Her mother looked at her sadly and wiped away a silent tear. Lucia noticed and hugged her tightly. What about you, Mom? Will you stay alone? You have your blood pressure and sugar levels to worry about. Do you want me to stay? But Ana Garcia protested. On the contrary, I'm happy that you're getting married. You finally have your own family, and as for me, I'll get used to it. I'll be waiting for you to visit on weekends. And I'll bake ensaimadas for Sandro. Dear people embraced and shed tears, feeling a bit sad to part ways. They arrived at Maximino's home, and Sandro started telling him about the visit to Grandma Ana. Meanwhile, Maximino noticed Lucia's suitcase in the hallway and waited for the right moment to ask. Finally, Sandro grew tired and fell asleep right on the couch. Lucía gently moved him, covered him with a blanket, and sat next to Maximino on the bed. With hope in his voice, he asked, "Lucía, have you changed your mind? Are you moving in with us?" "I'm so happy." The woman smiled and said, "I do. I will marry you. In these 2 weeks, you and Sandro have become the dearest people to me. I can't live alone anymore, that's for sure. And we'll see how things go from there. Well, I can't just leave Sandro now. He has put his trust in me, and I have grown to love him. He calls me Mom, and that's fine. It's no one else's business who he is to me, whether he's a son or a nephew. As for you, I do have feelings, but it's more complicated. Just don't rush me, okay?" Maximino was overjoyed. "Thank you. I promise you won't regret it. I'll become the best husband and father in the world. Because now I have someone to live for." So they began living together as a family of 3. Maximino fully recovered and found a new job, while Sandro started his school. Lucía, as a true wife and housekeeper, took charge of organizing their home. Together with Maximino, they renovated, changed curtains, and repaired all the furniture. The woman enjoyed cooking delicious meals, baking sweet buns, and feeding the entire family. From the outside, they appeared to be a perfect family. Neighbors, however, were initially frightened when they saw Lucía, mistaking her for Olea's ghost. But gradually, they got used to the fact that she was a completely different person. There was one thing that saddened Maximino: they still slept on separate couches, and there was no intimacy between them. He promised not to pressure her, but she was the one who didn't initiate any closeness. They were the best of friends, although when he accidentally touched her hand or hugged her, he could clearly sense her burning desire. But for some reason, she carefully concealed it. The man worried. Maybe she doesn't find me attractive? Maybe she's only living with us because Sandro turned out to be her nephew? I can't bear this for much longer. I'll go crazy. To see the most desirable woman in the world every day and not have the chance to touch her. It's torture. Lucía herself understood that it couldn't go on like this forever, and to be honest, she wouldn't mind if Maximino showed some persistence. But on one hand, she worried that Maximino still loved Olea, not her, and on the other hand, her past experiences and relationships made it difficult. Plus, she felt incredibly awkward that she was nearing 30 and was still a virgin, not knowing how things worked. One day, they were invited to a celebration, a farewell party for Silvio, who was retiring. The celebration took place in a restaurant, with many people in attendance. Everyone was drinking, congratulating the retiree, dancing, and having a good time. Then, Maximino went outside with Silvio for a smoke. As they talked, a bit tipsy Maximino couldn't hold it in any longer and revealed his concerns to the old man in just a few words. Silvio stayed silent for a moment and replied, "You're foolish, Maximino. Lucía loves you more than life itself. Don't be timid, take the initiative because that's what she's waiting for." Maximino hesitated. "I promised not to pressure her. What if she gets upset?" Silvio laughed. "Women always say that, but they're secretly hoping that the man will make the first move. Trust me, I've known Lucía for many years." And Maximino made up his mind. Sandro was staying overnight at Grandma Anna's that day. They entered the apartment, and Maximino passionately kissed Lucía, holding her close. He was afraid that she would push him away and get angry, but to his surprise, she responded to the kiss and melted in his arms, allowing everything to happen. It was such a night of passion. They were immersed in love and tenderness, whispering the most intimate phrases to each other. As morning approached, while kissing Lucía, Maximino whispered, "We've been such fools. We wasted so much time. I love you, Lucía. It's you the one I love, don't worry. You're nothing like Olea in terms of personality, only in appearance. And I live with you and for you." Lucía melted at his words and replied softly, "And I love you, Maximino." Soon, the couple got married, and they started dreaming of having children together because Sandra was longing for a brother or sister. Let's wish them happiness because they both truly deserve it.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.